Hello, everybody. Saif Al-Basri here with Professor Manzotti, Riccardo Manzotti. He is a philosopher, a psychologist, and an AI expert, and the author of The Spread Mind, Why Consciousness and the World Are One. He's a professor of theoretical philosophy at University of Milan. He has been a Fulbright visiting scholar at MIT Boston. He has published many books about papers on the topic of consciousness, machine consciousness, perception, philosophy of mind, and his recent book in German, Ich denke, aber wer ist ich, with Anne Hanshagen. So the reason why I'm starting this because I was driving the car and I told you that before, and I was listening to the idea of consciousness, spread mind. It was new to me, spread mind, and the idea is intriguing. You are presenting a novel theory of consciousness. We will talk about it now, but you're originally specialized in robotics and AI. So why did you start there first and not philosophy?
Well, I started from hard sciences, from let's say computer science, robotics, and AI, because I believe that there are no mysteries. So it is easier if you start from something relatively simple as a machine, and then we try to figure out how perception, consciousness, and the like may take place in the physical world. So, studying models of perception in machines, for me, it is ideal to understand what's really going on when we see the world.
Okay.
And, right.
And you studied AI robotics first, and you have been working in this domain for a few years. And do you find
Yeah,
any link?
for 15 years, I've been working on robotics, and my field was artificial vision. I was particularly interested about how we can put together two images. You know, human vision is a stereo vision that merge together two different, the left and right image, but we have a unified experience. And as far as we know, there's no unified screen in the brain. So this is still a kind of hard problem for neuroscientists and AI expert. How do we put together two different, let's say, visual fields, and how do we have a unified experience of the world? Neuroscientists call this problem the binding problem, but basically the same problems appears everywhere, both in AI and in neuroscience.
So your intriguing hypothesis is that one's mental experience is the physical world and not a model of the representation of the world itself. Is that what is basically in one sentence?
Yes, exactly. I mean, yeah. You got the core of my hypothesis, and basically there's a connection between putting forward the hypothesis of spread mind that, as you said, it is the identity between our experience and the external world. So literally it's the idea that we are made of the external world, not of representations of the external world. And as I mentioned, I got to this idea because I had to set aside all alternatives, and also because working in AI, it's pretty obvious that there aren't any mysterious thoughts or mysterious properties going on inside a robot or inside the brain. There are just physical processes. So once you move from hard sciences, I think we need to find a completely physicalist solution to the problem of consciousness. And if consciousness is not in the brain, then we must look for consciousness elsewhere. My proposal is to look for consciousness in the world itself.
Okay, so you have a very beautiful example when you elucidate the idea to your audience about the apple, using an apple. Would you like to demonstrate it again? Because it's kind the audience need to, or someone who listens to your idea, maybe he needs some times to grasp what you're actually meaning with this extending my consciousness to the world.
Yes,
Using the apple,
yes.
actually, it's a brilliant example because it's easy, very easy to understand.
Yeah, exactly. I love the example with the apple because it is extremely straightforward. So
Mm.
imagine you have an apple in front of you. You
Yeah.
are holding this apple,
Mm.
and imagine that you have an experience of the apple.
Mm-hmm.
To make things simple for the sake of the example, so let's suppose that you have a visual experience of the apple. Then, of course, you may have also a tactile experience, or you can touch or smell the apple, but just keep things simple. You see the apple.
Mm.
So, right now, when you see the apple,
Yeah.
what do you find in your own experience? I would say that you find something which is red, round, and shiny, more
Mm-hmm.
or less. That are the first properties of the apple.
Mm-hmm.
But then the problem is the hard problem is that such properties are not um, instantiated by anything taking place in the brain. So, in
Mm-hmm.
other words, in the brain there is no screen on which the apple is projected.
Okay.
This may sound let's very naive, but that's the problem. In the
Mm.
brain, there is no physical phenomenon with the properties of our own experience. And neuroscientists have been looking for our experience inside the brain for decades, for many, for ages, for many years. And they
Mm-hmm.
haven't been able to find anything with the properties of our experience of the apple. Now,
Okay.
and that's where I get to my hypothesis.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
At the moment when we hold the apple in front of our nose,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything physical with exactly the right properties of our own experience of the apple? And the answer is the apple itself.
Mm.
The apple is red, round, and shiny. It is very much alike our experience of the apple. And so, my hypothesis, which at first may sound a little bit controversial,
Mm-hmm.
if not utterly wrong, is that the apple, that the fruit that we hold in our hands,
Yeah.
is the best candidate to be one with our own experience of the apple.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I get it. So let's my when I listen to you, the first thing that pops in mind is externalism, which argues that the
Yes.
conscious mind is not only the result of what is going inside my brain, but it's also or inside the nervous system, but it's also what occurs or exists outside when I am doing something, when I'm calculating or I'm perceiving the world. So how do you differentiate, or is your hypothesis a sub domain of externalism? Does it differentiate itself, or what is the new intriguing idea?
Right. Now, in science, there are assumptions. A common assumption in the field of consciousness research is that
Sorry, would
whatever
you
consciousness
repeat that?
is,
Sorry, would you repeat that?
yes,
The audio quality wasn't good enough.
okay. So in science,
Mm,
scientists needs assumptions in
yeah,
order to carry on their research.
exactly.
And a common assumption, but we must question such assumption because sometimes such assumptions are wrong,
Yeah.
and they are the reason why we cannot proceed in our understanding of physical phenomena.
Mm,
In fact, a nice quote by Einstein is that um, sometimes the only step forward is a
mm,
step backward, is a step back,
mm,
because sometimes we need to question the assumption we move from.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned internalism and externalism.
Exactly. Yes.
So exactly. So that's why I made this digression. Internalism is the hypothesis that whatever the mind is, it must be inside the body, and particularly it must be inside the brain.
Mm.
So the idea that consciousness must be physically inside the brain. This
Mm.
is what neuroscientists look for when they look for the neural correlate of consciousness.
Mm.
They look for something inside the brain that might be our conscious experience of the world.
Mm.
And this is a very good idea. It
Mm-hmm.
is a very acceptable empirical assumption.
It's
It
a
is
wide
a
accepted view in science, actually, that anything that occurs, or that our brain constructs, that the brain constructs our mental models of the world based on sensory information. I have a small brain; it's not a real brain; it's a model. So if I take it from the eye, some sensory information, they go through the optical nerves, and we're processed here in the occipital
right.
lobe. So basically, what science, the wide accepted view in science right now, in neuroimagery and so on, that consciousness must be inside. And then you hypothesize that no, actually, why are you looking just inside? We have to extend our view. We have to look to outside, because outside is part of our perception, right? Our consciousness, what constructs consciousness.
Right.
Is
Yeah,
that
I would say that that's perfect, very well said.
Mhm.
And two things. The first is that the information that gets inside the brain
Mhm.
is colorless, for example. So, how is it possible for information to become our experience of colors? Because if you think
Mhm.
about that, inside the information that goes through the optical nerve has
Mhm.
no color, has no
Mhm.
taste if it comes from other sensory organs, has no smell.
Mhm.
How can the brain take that information and transform that information in, say, colors, images, smell, and the like? Nobody has a clue about that.
Mhm.
And therefore, I say, well, maybe nobody has a clue because we are simply moving from wrong assumptions. And
Okay.
so you told me, don't why do we not take into consideration also
Mhm.
some of the external world that surrounds our body?
Mhm.
For example, and you said the stuff which is outside of our body is there, is physically there. And I would say that the surrounding world is part of our own existence.
Mhm.
So, for a moment,
Mhm.
let's not think of us as a body, but let's think of us as a moment of existence.
Okay.
What is my existence made of? It is not made of neurons, at least as far as
Mhm.
my experience is concerned. My
Mhm.
experience is made of books, cars, trees, clouds. It's made of the sun. That's what my experience is made of.
Mhm. Mhm. I get the idea. Mhm.
If everyday existence is my brain, I never had any experience of my brain.
Okay.
I've only experienced the world. So my existence is made of the world. So the hypothesis I put forward is
Mm.
that my mind is also made of the world.
Okay. So what if I let me to raise some questions. What if I dream about a blue unround apple? I don't know if you recall or you read about that. Socrates was actually speaking with Menos about a from God given poisonous root, and what constructs a yellow bee. Is there only one yellow bee, or it is only depends on the way we use the word and what is actually a bee. Is it a big yellowish insect, or it is very small, or it is yellow and reddish? So where we differentiate, and when does language play and communication play a role in constructing our consciousness? And what if I dream about a blue apple, because I didn't experience any blue apple in my life, so there is no information. I will assume there are no. Okay, this is a good example.
Exactly,
You get my
exactly. The
idea. You
blue,
get my idea. Are prepared.
exactly. The blue. I mean, you made the main objection
Yeah.
to everyone who tried to put our consciousness in the world.
Yeah.
Basically, you objected very reasonably that often our experience doesn't seem to be like the world. Our experience in dreams, in hallucinations, seems to be different from the world. And that's the main reason as to why people from Plato to René Descartes to current to contemporary neuroscientists, many people believe that our experience of the world is an inner world created inside the mind or by the brain as an act of imagination. However, it is interesting to study empirically dreams and hallucination. And one thing that people usually don't stress enough is that both dream and hallucinations are not made of arbitrary components, but they are built of the same, they're made of the same stuff, they're composed of the same stuff our existence is made of. So, this is to say that, for example, nobody has ever reported of dreaming about dreaming of a completely alien color,
Okay.
or nobody dreams of completely alien tastes or colors or building blocks of reality. That is why I put, sorry, this side, that is why I put um, this image, which is very funny, which is like your blue apple. It is
Yeah.
a trout, a fish with the head of a cat.
Yeah.
So it is the idea that we can recombine reality. But recombination of reality doesn't imply that we see or we create a new world. It
Okay.
only means that we put together our existence in new combinations. So this suggests a possible, completely different explanation of dreams. The idea is that dreams are a moment in which we experience our world in novel combinations. So the idea is that dreams are a kind of perception that is able to put together the world in new combinations. And you may say, yes, but when you dream the blue apple or the fish with the head of a cat, there isn't any fish in your room. And here I need to ask you to take into consideration relatively established a new idea in physics, which has been put forward by Einstein himself, and which is the analysis of the notion of the now, of the present,
The notion of the now. Yeah.
which is the notion of simultaneity. Exactly. So, namely, we usually, the layman or the commonsensical notion of the now is that the now is everything that takes place at the same time, right now. But then Einstein said this is a wrong idea, which is wrong in physics, because the now is not what takes place at the same time.
It's relative.
The now is made by all the things that whose effect takes place now. So not so something doesn't have to take place at this very moment. It is
Yeah.
enough that its effects takes place now. So
Okay.
an everyday example that is super simple to understand is provided by the apple, the moon, and the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So we can just walk outdoor, and we can have an apple in our hand. We
Mm-hmm.
can see the moon, and we can also see the sun. There are some
Yeah.
moments where all three objects are in the sky. We can see them all.
Yeah.
And but the fact is that they don't take place at the same time. The moon is 1.5 seconds earlier than the neural activity in our brain. The
Yeah.
sun is 8 minutes earlier, and the apple itself is a few milliseconds earlier than the activity in my brain, because it
Okay.
takes
I got it.
a little amount of time. So the idea is
Mm.
to see a dream as a moment in which our existence is spread
Okay.
to a larger time span than usual. And thereby we can put together different moments of existence. So when you see and that's the end of, sorry if I've been longer than
No, no.
expected. When
Very
you
good.
say, how can I dream
Mm.
the blue apple if I've never seen a blue apple in my life? And
Yeah.
my reply is that when you see a blue apple, you are perceiving something blue
Mm-hmm.
and an apple, and
Mm-hmm.
perceiving them together, your experience is made of a blue apple.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I get the idea. So if I really understood you, there is no inner world. There's the universe itself, and we are the world that we perceive. There is no inner world. Is that
Yes.
okay?
In fact, I like to ask this question to people, and I
Mm-hmm.
like to ask this question to you too. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when people ask you, look inside you, exactly, where do you look? In which direction you look? And I often ask to my students,
Okay.
I mean, tell me something about your inner life. And they
Yeah.
start talking with me about their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their car,
Yeah.
their house. And then I say, no, 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 I want to know something about your inner world.
Yeah.
And then they talk to me about their childhood, about their mom, and they say, no, no, those things are all outside your. I want you to tell something. And someone says, well, I feel my heart, I feel my lungs, my liver. And they say, yes, but those things, in a way, are outside of your brain too. Tell me something about what's going on inside your brain.
Mm.
And I challenge you, everything you're going to tell me is about something taking place in the external world.
Mm.
So you can tell me anything about the internal world, because everything that takes place in your internal world has to do with the world.
Mm.
So, if I may say, I like to make an example. There was this famous joke in philosophy,
Yeah.
turtles
Turtles
all
all
the
the
way
way
down.
down.
Exactly. Once they asked to Bertrand Russell
Yeah.
why everybody knows that the Earth is supported by a turtle, or in this picture by elephants.
Yeah.
But then Russell asked, but then the elephants, what are they supported by? And they say, well, by another turtle. And so it seems that if you accept this view, you keep to
Yeah.
add more and more turtles. What's the connection with your question? I believe that this metaphorical direction, where
Mm.
people think they may look,
Mm.
looking inward,
Mm.
is one of those leftover
Mm-hmm.
of the past. Once people believe that the heavens, they believe literally that heaven was, somewhere on top of us, and they believe that hell was downward, was physically downward.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
from Italy,
From
so
from
in
Hades.
Dante there is Dante. Exactly, there is this wonderful. He was a medieval author. There is this wonderful description of the universe. Now we got rid of the idea of the let's say upward and downward,
Yeah.
but we still believe of inward.
Mm.
I think that such a belief is just a leftover of wrong ideas from the past. There is no inside. Nature is all available, is all outside. There is, I believe that in a way I don't like any longer the distinction between internalism and externalism,
Mhm.
because I believe that such a notion has no meaning in physics,
Okay.
apart when trivially when we speak of a box
Mhm.
or my stomach, or when we have containers.
Yeah.
But we don't have to take that notion too literally. There is just the world taking place.
While I was reading your hypothesis, I started googling around and to know. I saw some videos of you explaining the idea. But while I was reading about it, it came to mind the extended mind model by Daniel Dennett. I know maybe you are familiar with him. You had interviews with him. Do you know him personally? Um,
Yes, yes, I met Daniel Dennett several times
mm.
in America when I was there at MIT. He's a great guy. I mean, he's an incredibly friendly philosopher.
He isn't true. And I was reading, I read his book a few years ago, Making Tools for Thinking, where he suggests that the cognition is basically larger than the body of the subject. And according to such models, if I am calculating and doing math, my consciousness extend to the calculation itself. And now he proposes with this idea that as you said early on, that we don't have to be um, mm, dependent on this dualism between internalism and externalism. So we just have to understand the way, in a new method, thinking outside the box. So it's basically goes in this idea. You calculate. Actually, I thought about this experiment yesterday. Okay, actually, it's right. It's some kind of extending, but I am still a enthusiast. So I'm believing that science would cognitive science would reach somehow a solution. There is some kind of stagnation, as you said early, and it is a problem. However, there are some new ideas. I don't know if you're familiar with Professor Penrose's idea of the orchestrated objective realities, or the microtubules in the um, inside the neurons. It's a quantum mind. It's actually amazing. I was reading the book, the quantum biology, and there are some processes inside the cell which were discovered by Golgi, another Italian, by the way, famous Italian, won the Nobel Prize. And inside an enzyme, actually many quantum processes do happen simultaneously, and there is no decoherency inside the cell. So there are some basic quantum phenomena that happen inside the cell. And Penrose suggested with other colleagues that maybe the the work of these microtubules, structural proteins, that inside the cell, when they resonate, they produce what we perceive as a consciousness. And this is actually something new, and so it is very intriguing idea. And it's not over yet. So science is doing his best right now. They didn't give up. What is your mind? I would like to know your mind about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no. I've been working with not with Penrose directly, which I met a couple of times, and also, but
Cool,
for example, with Stuart Hammer, who we met many times, and
cool.
Stuart Hammer is one of the guys who are working on the hypothesis of microtubules.
Exactly. Yeah.
I hope you're okay. Good. You meant froze, so I was just worried. Uh, however, I must tell that I'm a little bit skeptical about the quantum approaches to consciousness,
Okay.
and then I will get back to Dennett. But let me tell you why.
Yeah.
Of course, in the brain there are quantum phenomena, because actually quantum physics is the best theory we have about everything. So I'm not surprised in the least that there are quantum phenomena in the brain, in my Coke, or in my computer.
Mm.
Because everything is a quantum phenomena. So speaking from let's say, physicalist perspective, there is it is wrong the idea that the physical world is divided in a classic phenomena and a quantum phenomena, because everything is a quantum phenomena. The point is whether we need that level of explanation to explain what's going on inside the brain from the perspective of cognition or consciousness. I can make an example. Today, in a computer, for example, we have quantum phenomena because the semiconductors are getting smaller and smaller. And now, even if we don't want to have that kind of problem, we have that kind of problem because transistors, or whatever they are today, are getting so small that they have some side effects from a quantum phenomena.
Moore's law
However,
limits,
exactly. So we need to, for example, to shield from quantum fluctuations the semiconductors in a supercomputer, because the transistors are so small they are affected by unwanted and unwelcome quantum fluctuations. However, in order to explain what a computer does, we don't need quantum mechanics. Why? Because a contemporary computer is built basically as a Turing machine. Maybe in the future we will have quantum computers, but so far computers do everything as a state machine. So we don't need that level of description. Likewise, if we look at what neurons do, what they do, I'm not sure that it requires that microscopic level of explanation, because the relevant activity in neural areas is relatively big, is relatively
Indeed,
coarse. Yeah, I mean, a neuron, the neural signal, the speed of a neural signal in a neuron is 10 meters is 100 meters per second. So it's quite slow compared to what's going on in other systems. So I'm not sure. I'm honestly, I wonder whether trying to explain consciousness with the quantum phenomena is a little bit like trying to explain a mystery with another mystery, which is always a temptation in physics or in science or in other fields. So as far as I understand what's going on in the brain, we should be able to explain our experience, our consciousness, without having to go to the quantum level. As, for example, I mean, this is not something bad. For example, evolution can be explained without addressing the quantum mechanics. Evolution that produces all kind of organism is
exactly.
explained without having to get to that level. So I think there are two different approaches. About Dennett, I would just like to add a few comments about Dennett. Dennett, in I think it was 1978, wrote a very nice paper, a philosophical tale, basically, called "Where Am I?" In this philosophical short novel, he presents a thought experiment, and basically he takes into consideration the possibility that someone's brain is removed from the body, is kept into a life support system, and then is connected through wireless connection with the body. That might be possible. We could have the brain in one place and the body in another place. We do that all the time with robots and computers. We can have a supercomputer in one place controlling the body of a robot in another place. And the point Dennett wanted to make is that nothing in the experience of this subject would tell to this subject where his brain or her brain is located. So if your brain, for example, were removed and kept alive into, let's say, in the US in a life support system and connected with your body through a wireless system, you would have no way to know that you are no longer inside, that your brain is no longer inside your body. Because you would see the world just like you see it now. You would hear just what you hear in your room, and so forth. So the point then I wanted to make is that nothing in our experience imply implies that we are located in the brain. And so, as you said, Dennett was one of the first that started to take into serious consideration the possibility that we are not located in the brain.
Well, okay, this is challenging. The question what arises simultaneously is, fMRI, you're familiar with these studies. It's basically a basic approach in understanding the brain in cognitive sciences. When sometimes we can predict the choices of people before they even realize it. So something happens in the brain. There is an Italian psychiatrist, Massilo. Or Massilo. He in the 19th century, he was a psychiatrist, and he made some fractions in the brain, in the mode in the skull of the patients, and tried to understand the vascularization, or the perfusion of the brain. He when he, for example, he raised some questions for the patients, and the patient had to think about the moral problem, or calculating, and he suddenly observed that the brain flow and the blood vessels were extended, and so that was the first following the function. The brain follows the functions, and in the new modern fMRI studies, we have many experiments demonstrate that we can predict the choices of people before they realize them. So this is an argument against your argument here, which says actually something should be inside, because how could it be? Do we have really free will, or what are we? This is that's why I was attracted to your new book in German, Was bin ich? Also, who am I actually? What is my brain? What is I? It is not a solvable problem yet, but what is your answer? How do you react to it?
Yeah, I have a very general answer to that kind of studies. And those studies only find a correlation between neural activity and one's behavior. First of all, from those studies, nobody can predict that one has an experience. You can always make association, but there's everything that we observe in a brain is just the effect of external input, and is the cause of a behavioral output. That's all we get from neuroscience. So we have no direct observation of conscious experience watching inside the brain. So nobody has ever been able to see a conscious experience inside the brain. We've been asking people, when you are triggered, when your brain is triggered in this way, do you have a conscious experience? And people replied, yes, we do. But if we didn't ask to people, have no direct observation of conscious experience. We only measure neural activity in the brain. That's all fMRI, direct neural recordings, EEG, and other forms of neural measurement show us. They show that there is neural activity taking place in the brain. They show us where there is more neural activity and the properties of such neural activity. But all of that may take place without anybody having any conscious experience, as far as we know from the data that we collect. So neuroscience has only been able so far to find correlations. And the correlation are correlation with conscious experience, which is verbally reported by subjects. And of course, we have all reasons to believe that such verbal reports correspond to a phenomenon. But where and what such a phenomenon is not shown by neuroscientific evidence. Now, when we study a brain, it is a little bit like if we didn't know how a radio works, and we were able to study only the radio. And then we would hear voices coming out of the radio. And then we would say, there must be people inside this radio. Because whenever there are certain activities going on in the brain, in the radio, in this device, we can predict with in a very reliable way that certain voices will be produced by the speakers of the radio. But of course, there's nobody inside the radio. The radio is just a device in a network of radio waves or of wireless network, which has the role to translate such broader network in that point in a series of sounds that we hear, and then we can hear music or voices coming out from the radio. So it would be naive to study a radio and to study the electronic correlation of the sounds coming out of the radio and taking the radio to be the cause of those sounds. Of course, it's true. There's a sense in which a radio or an MP3 device is the cause of the sounds that we hear from its speakers. But it would be hopeless to consider the radio or the MP3 speaker as the only cause of those sounds. Those sounds, those voices, those music, those tunes that we hear from the radio are caused by a broader physical network that begins somewhere else.
Okay.
And so, likewise, my point is that neuroscientists are making the fallacy of the radio technicians who believe the radio to be the only cause of the sounds that are produced by the device.
Let me. I get your idea, and suddenly I have so many questions arising. One question is: you are familiar with the brain regions, and the prefrontal cortex is actually attributes to the cognition, actual cognition, and thinking about moral and so on. And you are familiar with the famous Cage case where he has brain damage, and suddenly his emotions, his social behavior changes suddenly, and even the way he perceives the world, the way his consciousness works. And I don't know if you read the book by Eric Kendall, What is the Human? It's pretty. He's a neurologist and actually writes about neuroaesthetics. It's a new subject domain in science, and he proposes the idea that actually from damages in the brain we can conclude some phenomena of consciousness. So it's another argument for the internal idea or the internal side. I'm just proposing counter argument to make it more interesting. They will say, actually, when we find damages, for example, in the hippocampus, the region here inside, where actually you can't see it from here, where you store memories. So we can actually find brain areas that are associated with some cognitive qualities. How do you counter these arguments? So how do you? Well, sciences actually do produce, or cognitive science do produce some evidence, let's say, for internalism. How do you counter that?
Now, First of all, I challenge the idea that there is any evidence that our memories or experience is produced in the brain. The reason why I say that is that we have no evidence that the brain is able to produce any content that has not been part of the external world. So, for example, congenitally blind subjects are utterly unable to conceive of or dream or have a hallucination of colors, no matter how much you stimulate their brain. There's not a single reported case of a congenitally blind subject who has ever reported having a dream with colors. Likewise, if we think about our own experience, we get back to the example of the fish with the cat's head, or the blue apple. If we think about our dreams are in a way extremely boring. We dreams of situations that are very familiar to us. We dreams of a recombination of our world, but we never dream of something utterly alien. Even artists who want to create new things, like the horror movie or the science fiction authors, they just put together pieces of the existing world. So, if the brain were able, like neuroscientists say, to produce conscious experience, neuroscientists should be able to present at least one case in which a subject had been able to produce something that had never been part of his life. Just one case. I would be happy just with one case. Show me a congenitally blind subject that, because you keep triggering his cortex, is able to see colors. They've never been able to produce any evidence that the brain in a vat, their classic model, is a real possibility. We've been in a way convinced by countless movies in which we saw this possibility, like The Matrix, in which they convinced us that just by triggering the brain is able to create a full-fledged, four-dimensional, full of color virtual mental world. We saw that in many, many movies, but that's not scientific evidence. There's no scientific evidence of that. What we know is that after we've been in the real world, our experience may be composed of the elements that were present in the physical world. So I challenge neuroscientists, show me one case in which the brain is able to produce a content, an elementary property that is not part of the existing world. Think of that just for a moment. Think of that. Think about, for example, color perception, which is an incredibly complex activity, which has to do with billions of neurons, with billions, trillions of connections. It is a super complex machine, the cortical area for colors. If colors were created inside such a machine, with all that could go wrong in a brain because of age, seizures, pressures, blood pressure, drugs, neurotransmitters, diseases, cancer, would you not expect that sooner or later someone completely alien colors? The color machine got crazy.
Sorry, would you repeat what you ought to expect? The quality wasn't so good.
Yeah, my point is that if colors were created inside the brain, sooner or later, because of disease or other traumatic event, the brain should made a mistake, and the brain should made a mistake and should produce completely alien colors, and we should have people reporting that I'm having the experience of completely alien colors. That never happens. As I insist on this point, we have no evidence whatsoever that the brain by itself is able to produce any conscious experience unless such experiences were part of one's existence in the real world in his previous life.
So do I understand you here? If I correct me if I'm wrong. So basically, you are accepting that the neural the work inside the neurons projects the consciousness, but dependent on the sensory information, dependent on the world outside. The work is still inside, but it dependent.
No, 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 no. The
Okay.
world is not inside. No, 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 no.
Okay.
The world is not inside. The world is always outside,
Okay.
and the brain
They act.
has a role. The brain has a role. The brain allows to the external world to produce effects through the body. In a way, it is as though my body is a puppet moved by the external world. So, for example, I
This
see
is a good
passing in
example.
front of me a beautiful Ferrari, and then I turn my head just to watch the Ferrari moving in front of me.
Mm,
What am I in that moment? I am the Ferrari. The Ferrari is acting in the world
mm.
through my body. Why
Really.
do I have to think to be a ghost inside the body? I am just the world that is acting through my body. Or to put it in a even more radical way, I believe that the brain and all the sensory organs and my body are a proxy for the external world.
A
So at
proxy for the
any
external
time
world.
there is exactly there is an external world, and this external world is acting because my body is its proxy.
Now I get your idea. This is a good explanation. Yeah, pretty well. Yeah. Now I really understand you your idea. A proxy to the world, maybe a proxy to our genetical information through evolution. Is that an idea you thought about?
Well, I believe that our genetic information has a role in shaping the
Mm,
proxy.
mm,
So if the proxy is different, what the world might do with the proxy is, of course, different. So
mm,
the genetic information doesn't have a role in creating our experience, has a role in tuning the
mm.
way in which our body allows the world we are identical with to take place. I have a metaphor, if I can use it, that I find it quite convincing. It's the metaphor of the dam.
Mm,
So uh, here I put a dam. So
mm.
the dam doesn't create a lake,
Yeah.
but if you build a 1 mile high dam in the desert,
Mm,
you don't get a lake. You just have a very tall wall in the desert, but
mm.
there's
Sorry, you have a dam in the.
and then you have
Sorry, you have a lake in the desert.
if you build no. Let me get back. So, if
Okay,
you
yeah.
build a dam, a wall in the desert, you get no lake
Mm,
because there's no water.
yeah.
But now, suppose that you build a dam
Yes.
in the right place.
Yeah.
Let's say in the Alps,
Mm,
and then in that place there is rain, there is
mm,
water,
yeah.
and after a while you get a lake.
Hmm.
You don't get a lake because the dam, which is just made of concrete and bricks,
Yeah.
it produces water.
Mm,
You get a lake because in the right circumstances, if you have this structure, you get a lake.
okay. I get it.
It
Hmm.
would be naive
Hmm.
to look inside the wall to find a mechanism that is able to produce water, to produce the lake.
Okay.
The wall is just something that in the right circumstances can allow a lake to take place, to form. Likewise, I believe that the brain does not create our consciousness. The brain allows to the external world
Yeah.
to act as a proxy. So the dam is the proxy of the lake, so to speak. There's an analogy there.
Mhm. Very, very insightful, actually. Yeah, I like thinking outside the box, despite any observations. But it's really beautiful the way we try to elucidate how the brain works as a proxy. It's a good approach. Maybe you will develop more ideas. Do you extend your hypothesis to AI? You're familiar with AI. You work there. It's part of your domain. Do you think consciousness or super intelligence will work the same way, will work as a proxy? It's actually makes it even easier if we think about brain as a proxy. Then super intelligence suddenly appears very um, um, yeah, reachable.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I keep working on AI, and particularly I keep working on the possibility of machine consciousness.
Hmm.
So the possibility to achieve not only an intelligent machine, not only artificial intelligence, but also artificial consciousness.
Mm.
Now, I think that artificial consciousness is a little bit of a misnomer, as it is wrong the idea to make a conscious machine, because in my approach, consciousness is not an attribute of an object, but it is something that that object brings into existence. So, for
Mm.
example, I don't think that my brain is conscious. I believe that my brain is necessary to bring my consciousness into existence.
Mhm.
Having said that, my theory is particularly, let's say, particularly, um, how can I'm missing the English word now.
Yeah.
Is a very good theory if one wants to build an artificial, sorry, a conscious machine,
Yeah.
because my theory does not require any biological stuff. So, according to my theory, consciousness is just a way in which um, a body is causally coupled, is
Hmm.
causally connected with the environment. So there's no need to have a biological body, and there's no need to have DNA, there's no need to have a living organism.
Hmm.
It is enough to have the right connection with the environment. And so it is possible, and I am actually working on that, to
Hmm.
devise and in the future to try to implement a model of AI
Hmm.
that might bring into existence the world as our brain does. And by doing that, we could have good reasons to say that that AI is also connected with a with some consciousness. So to cut a long story short, I believe it is possible to build a conscious AI.
Beautiful. Let's talk. Thank you for your answer. Let's talk about your recent book in German. The I try to show it in the background. It's not the way I really like it, but let's speak about it's not your first book that was translated into German. Tell us something about it. I would like to know more. Wait a minute. So I
Yeah,
question.
I'm very happy that now I have this new forthcoming book in German,
Yeah,
because I've been lucky to write it together with Anne Hagen. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. I'm not.
has
I
Hagen.
don't know. I don't speak German, so I apologize.
Anna has Hagen.
But yeah, yeah, that's better, because she had been able to
Mm,
bring my theory to everyday life.
mm,
So I tend to be a little bit theoretical,
mm,
a little bit philosophical, and so it might be difficult for people to see that my theory is a theory that allows everybody to have a better understanding of our nature. Let me give you just a short example. Today, neuroscientists and, in a way, the biological sciences are trying to convince us that we are our bodies. But think for a moment about that. We don't say in our language, in my language, but I know also in German or in English, we don't say that we are a body. We say that we have a body. And in fact, in all languages, in all cultures, people say that they have a body. So the body is not seen as the thing that we are. But why today, because of the recent scientific development, scientists try to convince us that we are our bodies? The reason is that the previous big theory of the mind,
We are the product of our
Cartesian
genes.
dualism,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly, Cartesian dualism suggested that we are not a body because we are a spirit. And that, of course, doesn't work with science,
Yes.
because nobody believes any longer that there is a soul, a spirit, a ghost like entity close to my body. So science felt compelled to convince that we are bodies, but that doesn't work, because as I was telling you before, we don't find our brain in our existence. So my theory, I believe, suggests a way to be physical, to be in the physical world, but not being our body. And that makes a difference in someone's life, because it allows us to be broader and greater than our bodies. That, as nice as they are probably not the best thing to be. We can be our world, our ideas, our friends, and to provide a scientific framework to endorse such existential insight that we all have. We are not our body. We have our body, but we are not a spirit. So another title that I would have liked to give to that book is Neither a Spirit nor a Body.
The title in German, Ich denke, aber wer ist ich, which translates to I think, but who am I? The subtitle is New Answers, also neue Antworten auf die alte Frage nach dem Sinn des Lebens, or new answers to the question about the reason of life and why the reason of existence, why we are there, why we are here, and why we think. It's a beautiful approach. And when will it be published, or is it in the market now?
It will be on the market. It will be in the market in April.
In
So
April.
it's really end of April. I think the expected publishing date is 28th of April. So it just by coincidence, it's just coming out.
After the lockdown. I don't know how it is right now in Italy. We have lockdown.
Right.
Okay. Well, beautiful. Thank you for your insightful ideas. Thank you for your time, Professor Manzotti. I hope you find more. You develop your idea with AI. I find this the combination of AI and consciousness is a very interesting theme, and many people outside the world are very interested in listening and reading about new ideas. And your approach is challenging, somehow controversial to the cognitive sciences, but thinking outside the box, and that's what I love. That's what I'm happy to have you here, and really appreciate your time. Thank you again to be here.